Okay. So I want to do next what we've been working with, but I'm going to bring it to some points that help us think about how it might look at a practical level, counseling people. All right? Think about it. Much of our communication in general, when I say our, I mean human communication in general, is involved in persuading somebody about something. Right? For example, when you're in a classroom studying any subject, I'm thinking of school children, right? There is a teacher persuading them that these terms and concepts go with whatever subject they're being taught. Right? That's persuasion. When we talk to people for information, we're trying to get someone to see things from our perspective. That's persuasion. Right? When God is communicating to us, He's trying to persuade us about how to see the world, how to see ourselves. Persuasion really is a major piece of communication. Very interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about bringing that now to pastoral counseling. I'm going to connect with what we've just been doing, but I'm going to add a couple of terms. And I'm going to tell you up front that when I first encountered these terms many years ago, it took me a while to sort of wrap my brain around them. I thought, I don't get this. I'm hoping I can be clear enough in a concise way that you can quickly see these as relevant terms in life in general, but also in how we influence and persuade other people. Someone, not myself, I'm borrowing this term from another theologian, okay, said that we want to be aware when we think about being human of what he called our structure versus our direction. Okay, our structure versus our direction. And when I first read this, I thought, I don't get this. I know what the words mean, but I don't get this. But here's how it goes. It's very important that we remember that by design, we have a divine structure, right? We've been talking about it this morning. We are made in the image of God. We are given a number of capacities that just go with being human, and we run with them. We have certain characteristics, and we've already talked about them, so I'm not going to revisit them, but certain characteristics, for example, are being relational. It's the way we're designed. Right? Some people like to do lots of human interaction. I'm someone who gets empowered by just interacting with people. Others are more private. That's okay. There's different kinds of temperaments, but we're still relational. Okay, we've talked about that. That's part of our structure. Right? Structure very much relates to carrying the image of God. Okay, that's that. Now, the direction part is this, that despite the way we were made, our experience has been very different. I'll give you one real basic example. Okay? Having 4 children and 6 grandchildren, I've done a lot of reading over the years about how babies form. You know, different stages of their development in the womb and then development in the years after birth. It's an amazing thing. I felt with my oldest child, who was a son, he didn't want to talk. Most kids start talking somewhere between age 1 and beyond that. He never said one word until after he was 2 years old. Not one word. He would look at you, he'd listen. You could tell there was lots going on here, but he just didn't want to talk. Very interesting. I thought, come on, kid, I want to understand what's going on in your mind. I learned it one day. It was wonderful. Okay? He was forming, and he finally got the excitement that enabled him to talk. We were standing in a window, and somebody was running a machinery to cut the lawn in front of their house. And Nathan looks out, and he goes, "Oh, lawnmower." That was his first word. Lawnmower. Not mommy, not daddy. Lawnmower. And that gave me an insight into his structure his direction. He was in the image of God, so he had this language capacity that was pretty amazing. But also I was seeing development in him. Now that was a good sign. All right? So direction has to do with development and what things happen. Now I'm going to give you the far opposite example, okay, of tragedy. Part of the design of God, at least for now. I did a wedding about 3 years ago. A couple of my former students graduated. They were working down in a state south of where I am, and they asked if I would perform if they want to get married. I said yes. They had a marriage, and within about a year, she was pregnant. They were very excited to be expecting their first child. And then they discovered in the middle of the pregnancy, this child was horribly, horribly deformed. And I won't go into the details, but I've never heard of the kinds of specifics. It was a very, very rare disorder that just the child's body was just hideously broken. And they were told correctly, most likely, the child will not survive even to the time of birth. The child's just going to die. It's going to happen. And there's a kind of a mercy in that. And that's exactly what happened. So they had the heartbreak of being now relatively newly married, the excitement of knowing there was a child, and then the profound, profound sadness of this situation. That also speaks to direction. All right? So the direction of human experience is related to not only our own sin, but sin in the world around us. Okay? Neither the mother or the father did anything wrong. They didn't cause the child's deformity. It just happened. Whatever leads it to happen, it just happened. That's the way it is. Sometimes we suffer because we know somebody else's sin in particular hit us. That happens. We have our own sin to deal with, but we also get the impact of other people's sin. We get the impact of a world that in some way works the way it's supposed to work, and in other ways it doesn't. So that's the direction. So I'm going to give you, in light of this, made in the image of God, but experiencing many different directions and brokenness next to wholeness. And here's what someone has said in light of all of this, all right? When we counsel with people, we need to know that sometimes they are suffering and needing help because they are depraved. And we defined that this morning, right? Sin-related, the brokenness, the messiness that exists in every one of us. We've talked about it, let's just build on that. However, that's not the only pattern, okay? And this has to be, we have to be realistic about this. But we also need to know, this is a glimmer of some good news in all of this. People sometimes are deprived of the resources they need in order to live a wholesome life. So they suffer, we suffer, because we are both depraved, but also sometimes deprived. All right? And sometimes what pastors can do is we can show people the grace of Jesus that starts to unravel and correct their depravity. Right? But we also have the ability sometimes to bring resources they didn't know were there. And they're deprived of what they need, and we can feed that and help them. By the way, sometimes the way we feed this is by what we can provide, and sometimes it's what we do to send them to someone else who's a specialist who can help that. And I'm going to tell you something factual, so please hear me out on this. This is true in America. I would think maybe it's true in Kenya. We know this is true in America. Pastors often feel they have to be able to answer every question and problem a person has. We can't. You can't. I can't. Okay, and that's okay. We're just being realistic. I believe over the years I've gained a lot of skills. I'm much better at doing things now than I was 30 or 40 years ago. But I can't meet every need. But I can work with people who do. All right? And sometimes those people are other pastors. Sometimes they're specialists in some area. Sometimes I deal with people and I can say, you know, my experience is a lot similar, is quite similar to yours. I really feel what you're saying. Other times, I have to admit, my experience over there is completely different than their experience over here. This came to me about 35 years ago. It's quite so. It's half a lifetime ago. I moved into a new church pastorate, and one of the older women in the church brought to my home one of the younger members of the church, and the older woman said, I'd like to introduce you to, and she gave me the name of the younger woman, who was a member of our church, but I was just arriving, and she said, let me explain why I, the older woman, why I am bringing her to you. She has a very unique and tragic story, and she's hesitant to express it, but she wants to express it. Short version. She was raised in an abusive household that included not only physical beatings, sexual abuse, and her parents got her drug addicted when she was 8 years old. This gal will never, ever be fully matured because her brain has been so, physiologically, so damaged by the extreme drug abuse that started in her formative years. Now, that's not my experience. I have other issues. Those are not my issues. So knowing that we're well equipped to help some people, not so much us, just admit that together. It's okay. God still calls us to be people helpers. Okay? That's good. We have lots to offer. But nobody is the answer to all the world's problems. I wish I was. I could make a lot of money, couldn't I? You've got problems? I got the answer to everything. I don't. Okay? So, depraved and deprived, different kinds of needs to be aware of as we think about shepherding people and how best to start to address them. Okay. So, practical thoughts. So just let me add a couple. And then, by the way, I'm going to ask you a question in just a moment. Pastoral counseling, I'm going to abbreviate it PC. Pastoral counseling is extremely diverse, okay? Which goes to our need to diversify the resources. I'm sure I've not heard every story there is to hear, but boy, I've heard a lot. I'm sure you have too, okay? Sometimes there are some relatively easier questions people have. They've got a job decision. Should I move here to work this job or here to work this job? They just want someone to be a sounding board as they think through a significant decision of life. I like those kind because they're kind of safe. I love to be able to say sometimes to people, you're going to be blessed whether you go here or whether you go here. God's just going to bless you either way from what I can see. Other times, there are more deep personal things where, here's the way it goes in life. Some problems in life fully get addressed or fixed. Good. Other problems in life only get managed. There are degrees of help. Okay? There's advancement. But advancement may not always be a total solution. Right? Okay. And realizing that there's these kinds of differences. Furthermore, in counseling, I'm going to come back to something I alluded to this morning. You all know the parable of the four soils, right? Sower goes out to sow. Some seed falls on the rocky ground. Some is on ground where there's not enough root to be able to get in. Some is on, it seems to grow well, but then the weeds tangle it, only some gets fully fruitful. I was very much helped by studies I did years ago that let me know that Jesus' way of teaching was similar to a number of rabbis that are outside the Bible. They're not mentioned in the Bible, but we know about them from Jewish traditional writings. Okay? So the rabbis had a habit, some of them had a habit of saying there are 4 kinds of something. Okay? So there was one rabbi, these are real, I'm not making these up. There was a rabbi who said, disciples are like 4 different kinds of kitchen implements. Okay? Sieve, strainer, funnel, whatever. Another one said, disciples are like 4 different kinds of fish. I drew some kind of, lesson from that. Now, I understand Jesus' lesson a bit better because he actually goes on to explain it, right? In other words, when we interact with people, he is helping us be realistic with this parable. There's very few, by the way, I don't know why that's fuzzy like this. If maybe this is possibly a bad battery going weak, do you think? Ben or Regina, could someone locate whoever might have an adage? I don't know if we need more batteries or not, but I'm just hearing fuzz that I think might be distracting. Anyway, back to the parable. So what does he do? So let's go with it. So he actually interprets, one of the very few parables he interprets. It's very helpful. So the first kind of seed that's going down is seed where the birds come and eat it immediately. By the way, it's very helpful to know that in the planting practices of Palestine 2,000 years ago, a person would sow the seed on the ground first and then plow the ground to soften it and turn it over to bury the seed. We do the opposite. I don't know how you do it in Kenya here, but in the United States, just the opposite. We plow the ground first and then plant the seed. But in Palestine 2,000 years ago, you sowed the seed first. And the farmer would walk back and forth in the field with a bag of seed, put his hands in the bag, and then swing it out here, distributing the seed. Okay? He doesn't know exactly which parts of the field will do better or worse. So, seed is the Word of God. Jesus tells us that. He interprets it for us. Seed is the Word of God. What happens when the Word of God, maybe through us, reaches someone? Well, in some cases, it's not going to do a thing. It's going to be like that seed that got eaten up. Now, there's 2 more in the middle here. Some of the seed does start to grow, okay? But it's in such rocky soil it cannot get good roots, all right? Sometimes we're going to see some good things start to develop with someone, and then it just isn't going to happen. Third seed. Some seed grows, and it's actually doing fairly well, except that there are weeds that are growing with it, and the weeds crowd it out, and the weeds choke it. There are people, I don't know about you, I'm sure you have your stories. My own story's big picture is that there are people I have worked with over years of time where I was really excited to see where I thought they were going, and then something got messed up. And it just, and here's what Jesus' words, the concerns of life choke them. Every one of us has concerns of life. Every one of us does. We're concerned for our own well-being is a healthy concern. Concerned for our families, concerned for our friends, concerned about how we do our job, concerned about anything about what we're about. These are part of life. So having concerns is not a bad thing. That's normal. All right? And sometimes those burdens are deep. I have 2 sons who in recent times have faced some major health issues. These 2 sons are both in their 30s, they have families, they have jobs, and they face some major health issues. That is a burden I carry. I know it's primarily their burden, but I do. I'm their dad. Right? We have burdens. Now, here's the difference. Here's the difference. Some people will only ever be concerned about their own burdens. That's all they do. You can put it this way. They've drawn a little circle around themselves, and then they always stay within that circle. They never reach out of that circle. They're entirely about themselves. That's the problem. It's a balance or imbalance issue. So seeing that, by the way, remember, what you see in these soils applies to us as well. It applies to us, all right? The 4th soil, as you know, is magnified, it grows, it's fruitful, productive, and so forth. But I want to suggest something to be realistic. life meanders. And even fruitful plants have some seasons where the growing is great and sometimes it isn't so great. All right? I've known people, many people, where if you were to look at the timeline of your life and you were to just take one slice, you might say, boy, I don't know if there's any hope here. And then other times it's just radiant and bountiful. And then maybe something else happens. And I think maybe, I'll say this tentatively, it's possible that a person was maybe the second or third soil and could move over to the fourth soil option. We don't know for sure. We cannot predict. So Jesus' parable tells us. When I was exploring this as a young pastor, I thought this is one of the most helpful things I can have, because younger pastors often have ideals. Ideals are a good thing, so long as we realize we don't always get what we want, right? And sometimes we can say, boy, it'd be great if such and such happened, and maybe it does, or maybe it doesn't. And being vulnerable to these kinds of things is part of people caring. Okay, it just is. Be realistic. The man who was the most influence on me going up and into my seminary training and in my early years in the pastorate used to say a couple of things. They were great principles. By the way, he's now in his 90s. Man's lived a long and productive life in a wonderful ministry. He used to say things like, the pastorate is a great place to be. And then he'd say next to it, the pastorate is a dangerous place to be. They're both true. They're both true. Because as soon as you deal with people, you deal with volatility. A few years ago, I was sick. I just had an internal infection. I don't know where it came from, and it was wearing me down. I went to the emergency room of the local hospital. They said, we'll give you some antibiotics. A day later, I was worse. I was in a second night. I said, I can barely move. They said, let's try one more day. I went a third night in a row, and the woman, the doctor there said to me, clearly, we've got to get you some intravenous antibiotics. I need you to spend a day in the hospital. I said, thank you, okay. And she was surprised. And she looked at me, she said, you just said thank you. I said, well, yeah, thank you for treating me. She goes, usually what happens is people scream at me. She said, you are the first polite person I have dealt with today. That's scary, isn't it? That was a doctor, very competent young doctor, in the local hospital where I live. So pastors are like that. So I know people, and I'm sure you do too, who just are so grateful for what I've been able to do. Others who are kind of in the middle, and there are some who it's probably best I just stay away from them and they stay away from me. Just the best way to go. Okay, 4 soils helps us see that. So we see that in lots of areas, especially with pastoral counseling. The experiences are diverse, the needs are diverse. So we do what we can, and we ask God to bless what we have. This is a good pause point, because I'm going to now open up a new subject that's going to take us into the afternoon. But I want to pause first and ask if there's any thoughts you have from what we're doing that you would like to either talk a little bit more about or reflect and share. The mic is open if you'd like it. Please, let me get this turned on, and I think it should work for you.
Yes, sir. You were telling us something about your son. Some reflection on the direction.
Yes.
I don't know, you did continue the story.
Okay, let me, yeah. So what I was showing is that, thank you for asking. I was showing that as we go through life, we have directions in life that are positive and growing. He was healthy, he was developing, his mind was working, and I could see him growing, and the directions were good. And I contrasted that with a tragic situation of a baby who very, very early on was just, the direction was a deformity and death. That's all I was just showing you different directions. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Other thoughts, questions, reflections, challenges? Please, let me get a microphone to you, and I'd love to hear from you here.
Thank you. A when we're just talking about the image of God and all that, there's something we talked about the nature of being sinful. I think we were trying to get that term and we managed to Google the depraved. So we see that man is sinful. I think that's what I got from you. So my question is, I've heard someone say that when you're doing counseling as a Christian, you should always treat it from that point of view that man is sinful. So everything that happens to a person, it's as a result of sin. So what they mean is you don't mix psychology, counseling psychology, with Christian psychology. So I would want to know what's your take about that.
Yeah, about the linking psychology with Christianity? Yes. Let me first, and then you may, okay? So, a couple of thoughts on this. To me, the field of psychology is research, right, into human behavior. It's research into how human beings think and process and emote and so forth, all right? And it's studying these things, usually in large numbers, and coming up with theories on how do I handle these phenomena that I'm seeing. And I think that's a very, very important, going back to the term integrationist, I think that's an essential piece to bring in because it is contributing insights about how people think, behave, how they're motivated, and so forth. Getting at human motivation is a very important subject, and finding these patterns often are shown in that way, not by the Bible explicitly playing them out, but by general revelation, the research saying we can see these kinds of things developing in human beings. So I think it's very important to bring the two together. And as Regina was saying earlier, we'd like to not see this as a conflict. Many people have made it a conflict. By the way, there may be points at which there is conflict. There may be points where what we think we understand from the Bible, we think we understand from research, don't seem to fit together. And I'm thinking, that's okay. We're learning. We don't have all the answers yet. I don't want to make them enemies. I want to see every place they could possibly work together. So does that begin to, I'll let Regina answer more, but is that okay to be? And by the way, when she says what she says, feel free to interact more. This is an opportunity, so feel free to do so.
Let me answer her question and then you can answer yours about that. Okay, so who gets to separate their church life and their home life? Nobody. Do you get to separate your church life and your home life? They go into each other, right? Yeah. They spill over into each other. Okay. So we're whole people. Okay? We're part, our mental health, our spirituality, our faith practices, our family systems, our educational systems. Okay? They're all part of who we are. Okay? So the only mistake that is often made is attempting to separate portions of ourselves and not accepting that we're all part of God. Every part of us is part of God. Okay, we're created in God's image, right? Okay, so our mental health is part of who we are. Our spirituality is part of who we are. So the big mistake is whenever you have therapists or psychologists or counselors who do not include spirituality and faith practices into treatment, or you have ministers or pastors or church leaders who refuse to acknowledge that those mental health issues exist. Okay, because you're denying part of the person when you do that. So that is the real issue, I think. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I have an example of this.
Sure.
Yeah. This is a real simple example, but it's a very recent one. I've had the pleasure just recently to be asked by two different couples, some of whom are my former students, but I performed their weddings this summer. And by the way, I've got to tell you something. In the state we live in, Pennsylvania, there is a tradition that at weddings, you have a reception with a giant cookie table that runs the length of the room. And people bring in cookies, and there's just thousands of cookies to eat at the reception. That's the best kind of wedding. Anyway, so of course I said yes. If you have a cookie table, I'm there to officiate. Anyway, when I do premarital counseling of a young, especially a young couple, I like to pose a question, and I'm not the creator of the question. Okay, it was psychologists making observations about males and females, all right, with patterns, and I like to ask a simple question. I say to the young man, very often, women, when they get married, are looking for what? I leave it an open question. Okay. I say to the young woman, men, when they're getting married, what do they think of? And they always smile. I say, I know you're thinking sex. That's true. But there's something else bigger than that. And that gets them thinking. Now, I didn't make up this question. Okay? The question came from a psychologist I was reading who said, here are the two answers. I don't know how this applies to your society. It certainly applies to Americans and Westerners. Women often are looking for some form of security. They don't all define security the same way, but they're looking for some kind of security, stability, knowing that there are frameworks in which they can step safely and productively. Men, it's interesting, men very often are looking for a companion, which again gets defined a little bit differently by each man. And this is a great way to get people thinking, but you see, I didn't get this from the Bible. The Bible didn't tell me men tend to think this way, women tend to think this way. But the research is a real simple example. But I got this from the research. All right? So I'm trying to bring together something that I hope then is helpful for them. So that's a down-to-earth example. Any thought? But good. We got some more. I'm going to walk down the center here. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll be right back. He had a question. I'm sorry. I forgot. Yes. Okay.
You had talked to the people's problems when we interacting with them. You say there are problems that are managed.
Yes, managed.
Managed.
Yes.
And others are dealt with. They are dealt with, or they are.
They're partly dealt with.
Partly.
Yeah.
So managed and partly dealt with.
Yes.
What is the difference? If
they're the same. In other words, some problems get solved, but some only get partially solved. Okay? So I could take this quick question. There are certain decisions in life where once a person has worked through the decision, they're able to say good, and they just move on in life. There are other things where the problems never fully go away. So I deal a lot with people who have emotional dysregulation problems. They're way up and they're way down. Involves many, many different kinds of issues. Those are going to be lifelong patterns that are going to need ongoing management. So some can be solved, some are going to need ongoing care. Because they don't get solved, they just get helped. That's the difference. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let me get this back to you, and interested to hear what you have here.
All right, thank you. Mine is just to get some insight on this. So what we've been learning basically shows us that even as ministers of the word or pastors, we need a basic level of psychology, so that there's that integration that you're talking about between the word and psychology. The reason of me saying this is you find most people don't like going for church counseling because the minister just focuses on the word and leaves out now the psychology by itself, where there needs to be that intersection of the two. My other concern or observation is on the ministers themselves. Who counsels the pastor?
Great question. Two very different questions. I want to have a board. That's a great question. So I hope everybody heard that. You'll be able to get it as I talk about it. So on the first question, maybe I'm going to repeat myself, so if this doesn't fully answer, you let me know. The question has to do with how do I bring the best of these two worlds together? My understanding of the Bible and the general revelation of people who study human behavior. I think, I'm going to play it out this way. If I ask you, are you a body? You'll say yes. Are you a soul? You'll say yes. Are you a spirit? You'll say yes. Right? Do you deal with human motivations? Absolutely. Right? I can ask you lots. Are you a thinker? Say yes. Do you have a mind? Say yes. These are very, very different kinds of things. So it seems to me counseling that only addresses one of those issues is not dealing with the whole person. We have a lot of different kinds of needs. Yeah. I'll get very specific, but I won't spend a lot of time with it. Big question, it's a good question to ask in America, the use of what we call psychotropic medications. Are they good or are they bad? And my answer is, it's a mixture, depends on the person. Are there people who probably can benefit from some kind of a medicine that helps their psychiatric state of being? For some people, I think it's needed. My concern is in America, there are many companies that are saying, take this pill, it will fix you. That concerns me. That's a terrible way to see human beings. Take this pill and you'll be all fine. No. Life isn't that simple. So I'm trying to bring two worlds together with a balance and appreciation for the diversity of all that it is to be human. Is that a helpful response?
Somehow, because I'm looking at it from the aspect of the ministers of the word, those who get their congregants coming for their counseling,
yes.
Probably marital issues and stuff.
Okay.
And you find the minister or the pastor is just focused on the word.
Yes.
And you tend to lose that congregant because they feel like you did not address my issues. Yes, I know the word.
Yes.
But what is the real issue that I need to tackle in terms of the reality on the ground?
And I'm suggesting sometimes the real issue is a complicated one. May I give an example that may help? Okay. So this is an area where I've done a lot of counseling, sometimes successfully and sometimes not. Okay. The area of anxiety, big issue. All right. I have no idea. I have to admit, I have no sense of the degree to which this is an issue in Kenya. It's a massive issue in the United States. Okay. Anxiety, especially of young adults, has gone through the roof. Okay, which is partly to explain why so many of them are going to street drugs to answer these problems. Okay, so my question, I'm going to take your question, I pose it to myself as a pastor. How am I best equipped to help someone with a high level of anxiety? And the answer is, it depends on the person. It depends on the person. Sometimes only, I want to go to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he talks about worry. It's there. Don't worry about tomorrow. Look at the birds. Look at the birds of the air. God gives them what they need. Look at the lilies of the field. God gives them what they need. He's more concerned about you. And getting a good grounding that way is sometimes very, very important and helpful. But not always. All right? Other times, I've got someone who, for reasons that are very, very different than their own faith, are struggling with anxiety. I'm going to be as specific as I can. I counseled briefly a woman some years ago who had survived an earthquake in a city where 6,000 people were killed in this city by this earthquake. It happened a few decades ago. Now, you say, okay, what's the connection here? I didn't think there was any until I was talking with her one day. We were in a public building, and up on the roof of the building were air conditioners with massive machinery, and when the air conditioners kicked on, the building shook. And the woman had a panic anxiety attack. All right? That was not something I felt very capable of helping. She was having what was a natural human reaction to a trauma situation. All right. Do I still want to teach her Matthew chapter 6? Yes. But I realized there were other kinds of help that were needed. That's, I hope that is just one example. Okay. By the way, you're going to get more of this next week from Regina's part. So I can happily, I'll set some of the groundwork that she'll explore. Let me add just one more example. Over the years, I've had some interactions with people who have served time in penitentiaries. They've committed a crime, they've been sentenced to time, and they're out. All right? Sometimes I can help, because they're now living normal life, and that's a challenge, having been incarcerated for many, many years. But there are specialty situations and what are known as criminogenic patterns, where they've learned the way you deal with life is by committing crimes. I have my issues, by the way, and I like to tell this is true. I was nearly arrested for the first time when I was 8 years old. I was part of a theft ring. We were stealing lumber from a young lumber. I learned early, yeah, I know. But I left those patterns early. I really did. I was walking straight by the age of 9. Okay, so that was good. I didn't develop I did crime, but I had not developed a criminogenic pattern of crime. That's where psychology, albeit connected with what we call counseling, comes in, and she's going to explore that next week. Okay, now, your second question, once again, was counselors, pastors. Great question. Couple thoughts. There's a number of possibilities. I'm going to start with the easy one and acknowledge that sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. Natural place to start is with the other pastors with whom I work closely. The natural place to start. It's a good place to start. Often, but not always. Because I'm hoping that as a person who has been around life for a while, the problems that I face, okay, trust me, marriage, children, work, health, mental health, we deal with a lot. By the way, a statistic, this reinforces your excellent question. The statistic we have heard lately in the United States is that within the first 5 years of serving as a pastor, 85% of people leave it for good. 85%. That's scary. They've gone through theological training. They've prepared. They're motivated to do this. And for a whole variety of reasons, which we're not exploring right now, for a whole variety of reasons, 85% will leave within 5 years. So anyway, tell us it's a challenge for me. So first place to go is our close friends. Now, what many of us have found is sometimes even the close friends that we really love are not good at helping us where we need help. I'll be blunt with you. All right? I consider myself to be, if I may put it this way, a very lucky man, because I have a huge cadre of male and female friends. Okay, of all kinds, of all ages. I am anything but an isolated person. I thank God for the friends He brought in my life. But I have found that sometimes the friends I've gone to did not understand, or they had some preconceived priority that made them sometimes very unhelpful to me. Next option, because there's other options. Next option. Sometimes pastoral counselors who are out of my immediate realm do have the expertise. So a close friend of mine, we've worked together over many, many years, although we live in different parts. We're close friends, but we live in different places. He made this comment. He said, I go for spiritual care to someone in, he mentioned another denomination, it happened to be Anglican. He said, my spiritual advisor is an Anglican clergyman. And he said, that's the person I can go to safely. He'll be blunt with me, but he is safe to be with. He's wise to be with. Sometimes, I'm going to add to the list, okay? Sometimes we need the care of a professional counselor. And I know those are harder to get in Kenya, but they're needed. Sometimes we need medical care. We do. I'm very grateful for medical care over the years. I won't go through the details. I have many, many birth-related problems in my body. Okay? The most obvious being the heart valve. It's a metal valve. And so I'm alive. If I had not gotten this 10 years, 12 years ago, I'm telling you, I would not be here. I was within about a year of death. Okay, it was a very, very short window. So medical care, I have a couple of trusted physicians I go to. Because I want to keep myself as healthy as I can be. I'm still human, I will face the end of my life someday, but I want to go. So, a variety of possibilities. Caution, if you are an isolated pastor, you are at risk. You may be a great man or woman. But if you are isolated, think about it. You are giving to people things that you're telling them, you need this, you need this, you need this. But I need it too. I need it too. I had a wonderful statement given to me by one of my professors at seminary. He's long past, he's with the Lord now. He was an older man, he was from Ireland, had a great Irish accent, okay? And he was my Greek teacher in seminary. And we happened to be attending the same church together. We weren't preaching elsewhere when I was a seminary student. And the pastor of that church was a younger man, by the way, a wonderful pastor. And I once said to my Greek professor, I said, how can you stand to sit under the preaching of a man who has been alive fewer years than you've been studying Greek? And he just smiled. He said, Jonathan, he said, I'm a sinner and I need to be preached to as well. I'm going to add to that. I'm a sinner. I need to be counseled as well. I'm going to add one more thought. Men, can I speak to you directly? Okay? For many reasons that are societal in many societies, it's a question I'm going to leave you with. You can answer it for yourself. I wonder if in some situations men have not sufficiently listened to the voice of women who have great wisdom and insight to offer them, and the men have not heard the voices they need to hear. Just a question. I'm leaving the question unanswered, but please ask yourself that. God made us in His image, male and female. He created them. One of my friends many, many years ago said, he said, I'm not saying this, he said, we're both in the image of God, but men have more of the image of God than women. I said, that's a horrible theology. That's not from Genesis. We are in the image of God, and there's a wisdom to be brought together. Thank you for asking an excellent question. Follow-up?
Yes, there's a follow-up to it.
But let me bring the mic for the follow-up question. This is a dangerous thing. You ask a teacher to talk, they just talk your ear off. You know that.
Sadly, I'm also a teacher, so mine is also a follow-up on that, because we are all ministers in our different tribes. When does a minister feel I need to take a back seat because I'm not okay? Because you'll find most ministers just start from the base of giving and giving and giving, and you turn a blind eye to your own emotions, to your own well-being. And that is where you find most ministers reach a point of leaving the assignment at the end of the day. So is it wise for a minister to feel that I am not okay and admitting to the point that I am not okay, I need to step back and get help?
Excellent question. Quick answer is anytime. So did you understand the question of when is it appropriate for a person who is pastorally caring for others to say, I've got whatever issues I've got, I need to step away? Is it appropriate sometimes to step away? Absolutely, yes. By the way, here's this question, okay? So here's a thought. Think of the creation of the world. You all know the passage. 6 days you shall labor, but on the 7th you shall rest. All right? And I'm not here to be legalistic about that. But it tells me a couple things. Number one, it tells me 6 days of labor. That's a lot of labor. God designed us to engage and work. whatever the work looks like, whatever the engagement looks like. He's designed us that way. There's a satisfaction that can come with that. And 6 out of 7, I think there are many people that need help with the 6 days. Okay, but you're asking about a 7th day question. So, 7th day, getting some space, pushing things away. You could do them, but you have 6 days to address them. That's a basic address to a need that is basic, namely, I need to work and I need breathing room. Okay? A couple of other ways, that's just one of them. A couple other ways. In churches that I'm familiar with, a growing pattern, this is one of the good things that's come about, is churches that have multiple staff will give a pastor a period of a sabbatical. Now, sabbaticals can be different lengths of time. We don't have to give a formula here, but they say to pastors, we know that you're carrying a lot. We appreciate that. We would like to see this continue, but we know you need space. I have a friend who just recently took a 1-month sabbatical. That's short. I have another friend I just talked to, he's just finishing up a 3-month sabbatical. Okay? I have another friend who was dealing with some major pastoral issues, not in his own congregation. He was on a commission that was helping another church that had big problems. Problems were in the newspaper. It was a horrible mess. And he was burned out dealing with those problems. And thankfully, his home church said, you've embraced a lot. And he took a 6-month sabbatical. Okay? There are other friends I have, people I know, where they have said, I'm going to need more than a few months because the issues I'm dealing with are so complicated and so overwhelming and so distracting. I need to pull out for a time, and I don't know when I'll be ready to step back in. And so even though I said earlier, 85% of pastors leave, that's for a bunch of reasons. There are sometimes very good, necessary reasons because people break. I have known a couple pastors who suicided. I don't want to see that happen. Thank you for asking. You want to add please that to it? Yeah.
I just want to give a quick illustration that I think simplifies this a little bit. If I have a pitcher of water and I keep pouring out of the pitcher, what's going to happen? Say it loud. It'll be empty. Okay? So if we don't fill up, think of ourselves as that picture. So if we don't fill ourselves up, okay, then we can't keep pouring out. We have nothing left to pour out. Does that make sense? Yes. So one of my professors in seminary said to me, whatever you're doing, you need to receive. So if you're ministering, you need to find somebody to minister to you. If you're counseling, you need to find somebody to counsel to you. If you're teaching, you need somebody to teach you. Okay? So we need to be poured in. So have you ever heard the expression, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? Yeah. Are you guys half empty or half full? Empty or full? Full? I'm neither. The glass is always refillable. I might be empty right now, I might be full right now, but no matter where I'm at, I know I can always have more added to it. Okay? So when we think about what we do and how we give to the people we serve, we always have to give time to ourselves to fill up. Always. And it's not a matter of weakness. Jesus rested. There's so many illustrations in the Bible where Jesus rested. And he was perfect. We're far from that.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, thank you. I think that issues she has raised it's been a problem in the African or Kenyan setup in pastors. Because one, there is fear of unknown. That a pastor doesn't want to stay away from the congregation. It's like he owns the members. and you won't like to be away from them so that somebody else doesn't take them.
Wow.
Two, it's like we in a competition that I can't consult you so that you don't look like you are on a higher level than me. And therefore, that is why most of the pastors, they give until they are abandoned. And whether they are doing it the wrong way, they don't want to accept it. Actually, the members are not the problem, it's the pastors. And you find none wants to submit to the other, whether they don't know or whether they know. It doesn't want to submit to the rest, to gain, to learn from the others. So it's a problem with the pastoral. So I wish we can have a body where the pastors can be consulting, which is interdenominational, so that you don't feel like you've submitted to a particular pastor, but you consult in that level, all of us, so that we can be helped. Because the members themselves have no problem, but the pastors, it's like they're in a race.
And though some of that dynamic does play out in some American situations, I think it's much more of an African issue. It's a larger cultural issue, right? How pastors perceive it, it's almost like a pyramid of authority.
So, may I make an observation? Please don't think it's a judgment. Okay, please. Okay. But how much do you think pride plays a part of that? I'm just getting a few chuckles. Is pride part of that? Okay. So whenever we think about that, I'm going to ask a can of worms, a question that...
I'm going to step away.
Okay. So in some American churches, it is felt that women shouldn't be in the pulpit. They shouldn't lead a church. Okay. Allowed. Okay. So, and I'm kidding whenever I say allowed. Okay. Because I was called by God. Okay. I was called by God. Who's allowing my calling but God? Okay. So when I approached and I never went to seminary to be in the pulpit. It's the last place I wanted to be. Okay. But that's where I was called. Okay. So I approach the pulpit every Sunday with humbleness. Okay. I'm a sinner. I don't have any right to be in the pulpit. But that's where God placed me. Okay. So if we start to approach our work with that level of humbleness, then we can get past our pridefulness to serve better and to be able to be fed better and to support each other better. It's all God's kingdom. Okay? It's not your kingdom or your kingdom or your kingdom or my kingdom or his kingdom. Okay? It's all God's kingdom. And we're all to work together. Okay? So, Dr. Watt's been ministering for 40 years?
Almost 45.
Almost 45 years. Okay? But he belongs to my church. Oh! So he does. So in the Sundays that he's not guest ministering, he sits in the congregation and he listens to me preach. So he serves, our firm serves a few other churches where we consult with them. They don't have a full-time pastor. Okay? But he belongs to my congregation, and he exactly the illustration that he talked about earlier is that we have to approach each other with some humbleness. Okay? Do you learn things from my
Of
sermons?
course. I do.
What? You think that's funny?
You know.
Oh, no!
I'm old, is what you're saying.
No, I think he was talking a piece of our household.
Oh.
Okay, but I'll say this for my groups, my therapy groups that I lead. Okay, what can I learn from some inmates? I learn lots from them.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I approach you, and I don't feel like you have anything to offer me, wow. Every person has something to offer us. Every person has something that they have value to give. They're created in the image of God.
It's what the Reformation called the priesthood of all believers.
Okay? So when we start to approach what we do with that humbleness, the first will be last, the last will be first. We're not first. We're humbly serving. And when we start to change that mentality of how we look at that, it makes it much easier to accept help, to offer help, and to not do it in competition. Does that make sense?
I want to add, I can say that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this goes very nicely with what she just said. Let me add a practical piece to this. Wherever you're pastoring, you should be working with other leaders. Now, different churches would call them different things. So in the Presbyterian tradition with which I've worked the most, we call them two groups, elders and deacons. Elders are face-to-face with people on various things. Deacons tend to deal with property, money, and material needs. It's a nice mixture. In the church where I'm helping as a pastoral worker, okay, separate from where Regina is, they have what's called a council. Council is made up of about 8 or 9 men and women, and we work closely together because I make certain decisions on my own, but I want them as much as possible to represent the whole group. So it's not me facing issues, it's us together facing issues. Good way to go. So that also helps. Doesn't solve everything, but it goes a long way to very practical. These are excellent questions. Thank you for that as well. Okay.
I have a
Please, this is good. I'm very. You're smiling nervously, but this is what we want. Don't get embarrassed at all.
Well, I'm smiling because mine is a theological kind of question.
Okay.
Just recently in Kenya, we buried a pastor who's died through suicide. And I think I know this one who's been buried, who's just died. And my question is, I've been a pastor, I've served all years. When I die out of suicide, what is my ultimate goal? Destination, where do I go? Is it in the bosom of God or on the other side?
Where do you go afterwards? Okay.
Yes, after you die.
Oh, this is, you've asked a question that many people have asked. It's absolutely appropriate. So, I'm first going to make a general comment. Suicide is a complicated matter. In my congregation 10 years ago, on my first trip to Kenya, while I was here in Kenya, we had a murder-suicide in our own church. Young couple, 45. We knew that there were issues, but they weren't normal issues. They were strange issues. He shot and killed her, and then he shot and killed himself. Broke our hearts. Okay. I have many other stories of suicides of people of all ages. What leads to suicide is complicated. Okay? The best known suicide in the Bible, of course, is Judas. But interestingly, notice this. It's not the suicide that tells us something about Judas. It's the label that the Bible gives him and the description. For years, he was a thief. He stole from the other apostles. Now, that's not the end of the world. You can be a thief. There's forgiveness. There's forgiveness. But the problem is throughout his life, from what we know, what the Bible's saying, there is no ownership on his part of his own sin. And that's why Paul said, depending on what translation you're using, this is the term the Bible uses, the son of perdition. Perdition just means hell, right? Son of hell. So we know that when he dies, from the limited amount it appears he's not with God. But I'm not making that judgment. I'm telling you what the Bible is implying to me. Okay. So, could a person suicide because they have rejected all the things they should be embracing? That's one possibility. But there are many other occasions that lead people to suicide. Okay? I happened to grow up in a household. The reason I grew up my later years in America was my mother had the first of a whole sequence of lifelong suicide attempts. And my dad was advised, bring her to America for the next year. So we did. That's how we came to America permanently. So something's very close to my heart. When a person dies, they go to the presence of God. Okay? Whether a person is in the hand of God before it's a true child of God, God only knows. Okay? So I don't say to someone automatically, if someone has suicide, that they are or that they aren't in the presence of God. God only knows. So I don't try to explain what I can't know and understand. All right? I will give you a thought, and I feel very strongly about this. Specifically, I'm going to give you an example. A friend of mine who was very, very sick with cancer. He had a lot of medications he needed to be on, and it was not going well. And he took his own life in his own home. And some of the people in his church said, well, he must have gone to hell. And thankfully, the elders of his church said, wait a minute. Look at the entire life. He loved God. He loved people. He loved. He loved. He was a good man. Not a perfect man, but a good man. And so, presumably, in the confusion of his medications and the frustration of dealing with a very, very, he was going to be dead within weeks. It's a pity, it's tragic that he chose that option, but that does not mean he's going to. What sin is unforgivable? We all have an answer for this, by the way. What sin is unforgivable? Jesus tells us. What sin is unforgivable? Blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, right? Whatever that involves entirely, at the minimum, it's resisting God's work in us. Okay. So suicide is terribly, terribly tragic, but God is bigger than that situation. That's the best I can offer to what is a very appropriate question, and it's one I've faced repeatedly. So we can talk more later if you like. It's a good question. It really is. Okay, yes?
Forgiveness.
Yes.
Are we forgiven when we have not confessed, or God understands that we intended to confess and forgive us?
Good question. By the way, it's a good question, and it's related to another question. If someone does not seek forgiveness to a friend, can they get forgiveness? Yeah, they're very closely related. I've gone back and forth on this. I'll tell you why. Let's remember we can all agree on something. The Bible urges us to confess our sins. Right? That's easy. It's in 1 John, among other places. You know, if we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves. We call them a lie. That's 1 John 1. Okay, somewhere around verses 7, 8, 9. So we know that ideally the two go together. Confession and forgiveness. That's the goal. Now, let me ask you something. Do you know every sin you've ever committed? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. We know a lot of what we've committed. But I'm sure we don't know all sin. Do we still hope to be forgiven? Absolutely. That's the beauty of grace, right? God loved us even while we were unlovable. That's why it's a good question. It's a great question, but that's why I'm going to give a cautious, only part of an answer. The ideal is confess and get forgiveness. Absolutely. But it is not always a tidy picture. I am sure, I think I'll speak for myself, I'm not going to use details, but I think some of my worst sins have been what I would call sins of omission, where God wanted me to do something and I simply was afraid to do it. I'm sure I have a lot of those. But I trust that in His gracious mercy, God forgives. By the way, can I have a question that you didn't ask, but I'm going to have one. This is a practical one. Two people, one of them does offenses against this person is grossly sinning against this person. Okay? And this person keeps on wanting to do it. Can this person forgive but stay away from the offender? I think the answer is yes. By the way, one of the applications of that is this person, and I've known people who do this, someone who is abusive to children and is not willing to own responsibility for what they did. And this person over here has to keep a safe distance. Well, I forgive you, but do not come too close. You stay away. And churches need to be careful not to put repeat offenders into positions that will tempt them to do more. Practicality. I know you didn't ask that, but I want to add that to it. There's more questions coming. Okay.
That means that if we forgive, we have to forget about it.
I don't think we truly forget. No, I mean practical. If you slap me across the face and I live another 50 years, I'm going to remember that. Okay? Now, there is a metaphor. God forgets our sin. I know that's in the Bible. I take that as a metaphor. Does God really forget stuff? I don't think so. It's a metaphor. It's a way of understanding. It's as if God had forgotten. So, I know we have a phrase, forgive and forget. I think we need to say, forgive and be wise. I'm glad you asked that question. Because if we're not wise, sometimes something gets perpetuated and someone feels they have a free ticket to keep on misbehaving. That's not a good thing.
Recently we took a case where a member tells the other member, yes, you offended me, so we can't share the same church. That is the same fellowship. That means he has not forgiven. Though if he has forgiven, then it's still holding a grudge.
Maybe, sometimes. However, I'm going to give you a specific example. True story. Okay. By the way, one of many like this. Young man, young woman are engaged to be married. And before they're married, she discovers in him a tendency to control, manipulate, lie, and threaten her. And she realizes this is a danger. I'm not going to get married to this man. I'm seeing these already before we're even married. It's not going to get better after marriage. So she breaks off the engagement. All right? He still pursues her. He actually starts tracking her. Very dangerous person. So what did she do? He stayed in a certain church. She moved to a different church. She needed distance. So was it lack of forgiveness? Not necessarily. It was just a matter of practical safety.
Oh, is it practical safety?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. My little son, who is now a nurse, loved as a child to pick up dangerous animals, especially snakes. Okay? And he once picked up a copperhead, which is a poisonous snake. Okay? And he was smart. He knew it was a copperhead. He caught it just fine, caught it behind the neck, and he showed his mother, and he showed his brother. He was very proud of his catch. Okay? And she said, throw it back. And as he was throwing it back, the snake whipped around and got up and stung him on the finger. Okay? And his hand started to swell, and his arm started to swell. And he rushed him to the hospital. Okay? And thankfully, within a few hours, it relaxed. And the doctor wrote orders after, they always tell you what to do when you get out of the hospital. And I'll never forget, my son was about 8 years old at the time. And in big block letters, the doctor wrote, "Stay away from snakes. Do not pick up snakes." By the way, did you listen? No. But you get the wisdom part, right? You got a snake who's going to bite you. Maybe you want to stay away from it.
So back to our question about suicidal. Whether it is somebody's life, God hates, shedding blood or
That's right.
murder.
Yes.
Actually, somebody committing suicide, it is murder. So, does not that one translate to violating?
Agreed. Logically, it's violating God's law. That's correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
when we don't actually now admit, when we do that
Yes.
translates to not, going to heaven
It's
or
true.
sharing
Yep.
the kingdom.
God also says liars shall not go to heaven. Have you ever lied? Of course you have, because we all have. We've all lied some in our lives. And yet the Word of God says liars will not inherit the kingdom of heaven.
But you see, at some point in life,
Yeah.
maybe one may confess the lies or the omissions before we get.
I know, before we get
But
there.
now, this is somebody who has already taken life. He didn't have time to confess. Or even if he confesses, he has already done it. So, what is the fate really?
I leave it in the hands of God. That's a good question, but I don't know the answer. I leave it in the hands. I know God is a gracious God. I know that, and that's all I know. By the way, can I ask you another question? A couple has a baby, and at a year old, the baby dies. Does that baby go to heaven or not? The baby dies, just naturally, something went wrong. Does that baby go to heaven or not? Because the baby never confessed faith in Christ. Okay, yeah. You don't know the answer, neither do I. That's my point. That's my point. If I don't know with confidence, it's a good question. But if I don't know with confidence what the answer is, it's best if I just maybe stay there. Okay, I'll give you final chance. Go ahead.
When Jesus talks of let the children
Come to me. Yes.
as he give them express right?
It seems so. He's very generous to children. Absolutely.
Because by that they have only the Adamic seed in
That's
them.
right. Absolutely. Remember, Judas was a child once.
Yes, before he became an Adam.
That's right. That's right. So, anyway, we know many things, and some things we don't know. That's okay. Well,